Hello everyone! Bem-vindos ao English Legal Talks da Bilingual Minds. Esta é uma série gratuita em inglês em que abordaremos tópicos da atualidade do contexto legal. Ela foi criada pela Bilingual Minds para acompanhar o nosso conteúdo de inglês jurídico. Na primeira edição, vamos falar sobre deportações nos Estados Unidos, as últimas notícias e eventos recentes na atual administração Trump, dissecadas pelo nosso professor de inglês jurídico Fábio Schlichting, advogado empresarial. Eu sou Simon Banha, diretor de cursos da Bilingual Minds, especialista em gestão de educação, e juntos vamos apresentar o nosso primeiro English Legal Talk. O English Legal Talks é um conteúdo suplementar dos nossos cursos de inglês jurídico, e se você quiser se aprofundar mais sobre este e outros assuntos, siga os links que estão na descrição deste vídeo. Enjoy the content! Hello everyone! My name is Simon Banha. I'm the Director of Courses at Bilingual Minds. What we have today is a special feature, a legal talk with our legal English teacher, Fábio Schlichting. Fábio is a business attorney and also has been a language teacher for many years. What we are going to do is have a casual conversation about some piece of news, and we are going to focus on the legal aspects of this particular topic, a very timely news about deportation in the United States. Welcome, Fábio. Great to have you.
Hello, Simon. It's always a pleasure to be here. I also like the topic because a lot has been said in the news, right? Many people have different opinions about it, but it's also very important to keep in mind that there are legal procedures for this, right? And we're not going to go political with this. We're just going to try to take the law as our principle, right? And from that, all the fundamentals, try to spread what's right and what's wrong, what's fake news, and what can be accepted or we can agree with in terms of, what we've seen in the news, what can be taken out and what can be kept after this little talk. Of course, this is my conception of what it is based on the law, on the Constitution and the American law, right? And we're going to try to take our opinions out of this conversation, not to make it so personal, right? And try to make it very legal.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into it. For our first question to you, Fábio, here we go. What are the most common reasons for deportation under the American law?
Well, Simon, if you think about it, right, now in this second term of the American president, right, Donald Trump, some changes happen, of course, right, under executive orders, but I think it's important to think about how the system worked before that, right? And maybe in the second talk, we can compare the changes, right? What's different now. And we don't have a fiscal year that has, ended under this new administration. So it's hard to evaluate what could happen up to December, right? Maybe we still have more changes to come. We have to wait a little bit. But under the American law, right, today, what are some common reasons for deportation? First, is the overstaying of visas, right? Sometimes people go to the United States, they can stay there for, let's say, 6 months, but they stay longer than they should. Okay, so overstaying a visa is the first cause for deportation in the United States, right? A second one could be entering the country illegally. So what's the difference between the first topic and this? In the first topic, you entered the States, let's say, to go on vacation, go to Florida for some months, and then you overstay your visa over there. So the visa expires. The second case that I'm mentioning right now, Simon, has to do with entering the country illegally. You take a boat, you try to, you get a coyote, you enter the country in different circumstances that, do not really follow the regular procedures for someone who's on vacation or someone who's trying to study or work in the United States. So entering the country illegally by crossing the border, right, without any kind of immigration or visa. Um, and by committing crimes as well. So if you are in the United States and you commit a crime, you're there legally, let's say, right? But you're trafficking drugs, right? You beat up your wife, your spouse, right? Or any other serious crimes, that are in the American law, right? Also theft, right? That's also another reason for you to be deported from the United States. Okay. Um, Another thing could be, right? Another topic could be like by lying to the American government. Let's say you are there, today you have a green card, but the reason or the means by which you got this green card was all illegal, like a fake marriage with someone, right? So you are married, today you have all the documentation you need, but it's all fake. You're lying to the American government. That's a very serious situation that has to be taken into account, right? And also a reason for deportation. That was one, two, three, four. A fifth reason could be breaking the rules of a visa, right? So you are in the States with a student visa, you're there to study, right? But for some reason you get a job and you're doing something else that you're not supposed to do, right? So your documentation was for studying, but you're also working. Okay, so that's another reason, uh, another a way of being deported from the United States. And the last situation, let's say, is one that it's more open up for discussion, right? And you can interpret that differently, right? Depending on your uh, opinions about what's right or wrong in the United States, but that's more opened up for different opinions, which is being a threat to national security. So, what could be a threat to national security, Simon? Let's say you are there, and let's say you are a member of a group, and this group commits crimes. Okay, great, but you have not committed any crime. So, it's easier, to be considered, to be prone to deportation when you are into this threat to national security, right? So, in my opinion, right, this last one is the one that it's risky and it's a touchy topic, right? Because it also involves topics like terrorism, right? Serious threats to public safety, and it's more opened up for subjective points of view. That the American government or maybe even groups like, let's say, the European Union decides to deport someone because this person is a threat to, let's say, Portugal, Spain, England, etc. Okay, I don't know. I think it's kind of clear, right, Simon? Or
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
That sounds very clear and very encompassing too. Which also begets the question, what is the legal process then for deporting someone from the United States?
Okay, Simon. Before these executive orders, right, sent out by Donald Trump, there was a regular proceeding, to be followed, and if that was not followed, right, maybe the person could appeal to courts and could be reintegrated into the American community, right? But before that, before these executive orders, it was more or less like this. Let's say you were driving up and down the streets or going to a place, and for some reason, a public agent, right, caught you for some reason and asked for your documentation and you don't have it, right?
Right.
So, if you are picked up or noticed by these agents, let's say at a traffic stop, after an arrest, right, at a border, you go on vacation and you come back. So these public agents catch you. Okay, that's the first moment in which they notice that you're not there legally or something is wrong, it's not really correct. Then what does this person do? This officer, right, contacts, the agencies where he works, right? And then a notice to appear is sent to this person. So the same person who was caught in traffic, okay? So he'll get at home, right, this official or this paper saying that you must be present at the immigration court at a certain date, right? Or you have to explain why you're here in the States, overstaying a visa, or why did you enter here without permission, right? Are you entitled to get to be in the States for asylum reasons? Are you a refugee? You have to explain to them what really happened, right? Formally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
So you're invited to be there, to give your reasons why you're there undocumented. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's this first time you go to court, right? So there is this first court date, right? You're there for your very first hearing, right? The judge explains why he's trying to charge you, right? Why you're there, under what circumstance, right? And then you have to try to fight, for your stay in the United States, while prosecutors are going to try to fight for your removal, right? One thing that you could say is that you're there for asylum, but of course you have to undergo all the criteria, necessary for asylums. Um, if necessary, after this first date, you have a second hearing or a full hearing in which you're there, you can protect yourself, you can claim danger in your own country. Let's say you come from a country that they are at war, right now, let's say. Then you have to say, well, my country's at war. I try to stay here a little longer. I want to stay here legally, right? Then the judge is gonna bring all the evidence together, right? Bring witnesses. It's a regular legal procedure in court, in a tribunal, right? And then after that, the judge is gonna show his decision, right? So one could be you could stay there, right, in the United States. You qualify for relief like asylum, cancellation, etc. Or you can be asked to leave, right? So a removal order, that's the word, a removal order is issued. Then you're gonna be kicked out of the country, right? Of course, um, all the legal procedures have to be respected, human rights have to be respected, right? But basically, the judge is going to decide whether you stay or not and when you leave as well. Okay. And of course, following the regular procedures of law, right? You can appeal to that. You can say, well, even though you got into this decision here, I disagree, right? So 30 days is too short because I have a house here. I have to sell it in case you ask to leave the country. Or I have kids here. They go to school. They have to be transferred to another one in my homeland. And or you can say, well, I totally disagree with this order, right? I want to stay here because all my family is here. They're all legally. I'm the only one who's here undocumented. So you can appeal, you can bring different reasons you want for this appeal. All right. And if you lose all of the appeals, right, there's no other way of appealing anymore, then you're going to be asked to travel back to your home country, right? But then somebody have to also consider, right, that we have noticed recently, and that's part of the news I want to share with you soon, that some people are asked to go to El Salvador, right? And some of these people, right, they come from countries that are at war, or at least they're not so democratic in many different ways. Let's say Venezuela, for instance. Uh, and then these people, they are, undergoing difficult times in life because of this transfer of countries, going to El Salvador first and then going to your home country without any other analysis of your own case could cause you a lot of problems, not just to yourself, but also to your family, right?
Exactly.
And of course, Simon, there are other ways of doing that faster, right? Let's say you're trying to enter the United States, trying to cross the border between Mexico and the United States, and then an official finds you there and says, sorry, you're not entering the country. So that's a faster way of saying no. You're not in the country
Mm-hmm.
yet, but you are denied right away. You're entering of the country. So there are so many different possibilities, right, Simon? That it's very hard to evaluate every scenario. For instance, Sometimes there are agreements, right? Treaties between the United States and some certain countries that happened to Biden, I believe, in which he accepted countries that were at war and from countries that were from people who belong to countries that were not really democratic. So then we have to evaluate, are those executive orders sent out by Biden still valid today under Donald Trump's
Mm-hmm.
administration, right? Or that was already canceled by Donald Trump's act. So a lot has to be, considered, but the regular procedure is this that I mentioned to you. Person was caught, an invitation is sent to his place, right, workplace or home, and he has to be present at a trial, and it's going to be
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
respected in all different ways. He can have a lawyer and all, he can remain quiet. And then in the end, the judge decides whether this person stays or leaves the country.
All right. But then it's not a simple invitation, right? When they call on one of these people to present themselves to court, they have to be there. It's not an option.
Yeah, before Simon, there were this. I think you might ask this question later, but there were the sanctuary cities in the United States, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
sanctuary cities were places, specific places in the United States, like New York City was one of them, in which if you're looking for a job, they would not ask you for your documents to see if you're legally there or not. You're there for a
Right.
job. You're not there to
Mm-hmm.
prove that you're legal in the country. So, in these specific places, undocumented immigrants were safer, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for Donald Trump's administration. And of course, certain things were changed, and also the possibility of getting caught at schools or at churches, right? They're also changed now with Donald Trump. But let's say your religious beliefs have to be respected, and
Mm-hmm.
the safety of kids and their families also have to be respected, because these two specific places are places for you to pray and study and be with your family, have a
Mm-hmm.
good time, and not to be asked whether you, not to be you know caught by a police officer, by the ICE, and sent back to your country. That could happen outside these settings, but not in there, right? So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but that's the way it worked before. There were the
Right.
sanctuary
Uh-huh.
cities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting concept, sanctuary cities. And I know we're going to talk about that a little later. But before that, let me ask you, in terms of the agencies responsible for deportation, is it one? Are there more agencies that are in charge of that process?
Simon, there are so many agencies, right, that are responsible for that. I can mention a few, right, the most
Mm-hmm.
important ones to you, but the one that is more famous now with the media is the ICE, right? So a lot
Right.
of people see
Mm-hmm.
ICE agents up and down, in
Mm-hmm.
videos, on the internet. But let's say, legally speaking, the most important one is the Department of Homeland Security, right? So
Okay.
all the deportation processes come from there, right? So um, let's say there is a new executive officer issued by the president. They're the ones who take the paper firsthand and decide what's going to be done with that, right? That's this
Mm-hmm.
department, the DHS. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's say that this is the one that rules all the other different agencies, right? Everyone reports to the DHS, the Department of
Mm-hmm.
Homeland Security. And then there is the US Customs and Border Protection, right? This is an agency that protects the borders of the United States. So the border of the United States, states and Canada, states and Mexico, states and the Pacific, states and the Atlantic. So the borders are protected, by this department, the CBP. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So they check the passports, the visas when people arrive by land, air, sea, etc. So if someone has no valid papers to enter the country, so they turn them back, right away to their country. So they have to go back, cannot stay here. There's no need, Simon, as we mentioned before, to undergo all that process because the person was caught, at the border. And
Right.
something important too, Simon, to mention is, okay, international airports, the customs at international airports, are they national places or they're considered like international places? Let's say when you first land on the country at this airport, you are in an international area, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
you're accepted into the country, you're still in a place that, it's not exactly the United States, it's not exactly your own country, you're being transferred from one area to another. Until they say yes to you, you're still, you're still not accepted in the United States. Even though you got the visa here in Brazil, the
Mm-hmm.
moment they say yes to you in New York City or in Miami, that's when you can be relieved that you are really in the United States. But until that moment,
Mm-hmm.
you have to report, you have to respect the US Customs and Border Protection, this agency. There's also the US Immigration, right, and Customs Enforcement, the ICE, right, the so-called ICE you see around.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that if you compare that to Brazil, will be more or less like this. Um, there's the Ministry of Defense, right? There are the different, secretaries that report to this minister, and then there are the agents who are in the streets, who are talking to this, people who are trying to enter the country or who are doing something right or wrong, So these police officers, let's say, they're agents from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the ICE, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
handle all these arrests, right? And court cases inside the country, right? So they pick up these non-citizens who are suspected, violating immigration laws in the streets, right? And take them to court, right? Or they serve the notice to appear and escort people to detention centers, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And here, guys, Simon, I really don't want to enter into details about, whether they're doing the right thing with these detention centers or not. There's also El Salvador now, right, which is more or less
Mm-hmm.
like it's not really a detention center, but is a place between detention center and homeland. It's a place in between. Let's not keep this undocumented immigrants in the States. Let's keep them somewhere else. Let's keep them in El Salvador. More or less like what happened during the Bush administration with terrorists, right? With the
Right. Mm-hmm.
Guantanamo prison, right? And today there is El Salvador too, also as an option. But there are these
Mm-hmm.
detention centers, that these people are taken to. They're not criminals yet. They're
Mm-hmm.
just, there to wait for the due process to, follow up to the end and up to the decision of the judge, saying that you can stay in the country or you have to leave. And
Right.
there's more to come, Simon. Sorry, wait a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the Executive Office for Immigration Review, the EOIR, right? So that's the agency that runs these immigration courts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they hold all the hearings, right? Where people fight for removals or ask for relief, like asylum, right? So the process is a little bit different from a regular due process in the United States because it has to do with documents, with paperwork, right? So why undergoing a process that could be, last like for a year or more, right? If it's
Mm-hmm.
just for the judge to check, okay, you can stay here or not, it's a simpler process, of course, respecting all the rights that these people have, right? But it's a bit faster than regular, processes in the United States, So if you get sued there, right, depending on the court or the tribunal you go to, you can stay up to 3, 4 years waiting for a decision of a judge. Not here, right?
Mm-hmm.
The EOIR, things go faster, they move faster because it's either staying or leaving, not much to consider. There's also the Department of Justice, the DOJ, right? They oversee the Executive Office for Immigration Review, right? So that's where the Attorney General, the head of the DOJ, right? They can set legal rules that immigration judges should follow. Let's say here in Brazil, we have like regular courts, right? And we have courts of appeal in the States too, right? Let's say
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who tell judges in general, right? Who analyze this kind of cases, right? Whether a specific rule should be followed or should be changed, or let's say there is a new executive order, issued by the president. Are we going to respect that right away or wait like a day or two until, things settle down? So they're the ones who send, the most important, rules to the different offices, or immigration review offices in the country. There's also the Department of State, the DOS, right? They're the ones who do let's say, all this clerical work, all this work of documents, putting things
Hmm.
together, making copies, asking for, the immigration office, for, a possibility of, contacting the homeland of a specific person because the person has almost all the paperwork. There's only one thing missing here, but for some reason he lost this. They're the ones who do all of this paperwork. Um, they also work with foreign governments. Let's say they can talk, to Brasilia. They call Brasilia and say, well, we have this number of undocumented people here. Where should we send them? Should we send them back to Brasilia? Should we send them to São Paulo? How is that going to work? All right. So they can contact, home countries as well. And when it comes, to minors, Simon, things go a little bit different because they're more vulnerable, right? And vulnerable
Sure.
people have to be respected differently too. So there is this Department of Health and Human Services for minors, people who are disabled, or elderly people too, pregnant women, right? All of these people who are found, alone and who are very vulnerable for many reasons, right? This department has to be contacted, right? Someone who's super sick, who's undergoing cancer, some cancer treatment in the United States. Should the person finish his or her treatment and then sent back to the country, or should go right away? So all of that, right, when it comes to human rights, this is where the Department of Health and Human Services comes to, more or less like what Ministério Público does here in Brazil. Okay,
Right. Uh-huh.
and they all work together, right? If you get the CBP, right, the Customs and Border Protection Agency, right, they're the ones who flag or turn back someone at the border, right?
Hmm.
The eyes that we always talked about, they sorry, or issue a court notice inside the United States, right? They do, this contact between, the courts and the undocumented immigrant, right? The DOJ holds the court hearings and decides whether the person stays or not, and the DOS and the DHS, they do the final arrangements, like with the removal, right? And of course, the DHS can also say, well, we are going to send this person back to the country, but wait, you need to wait for a week or two because, this lady is about to give labor, and then we have to wait for that before we send, the mother and kid back to their country, or they can stay here with someone. So all these human rights have to be taken into account as well.